Celebrating 42 seasons on the air, Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension. Today on Farm Week, weather continues to be in farmers' way between blizzards and floods. Hard to catch a break.
Then there's African Swine Fever. Fears of an outbreak in the U.S. forced the cancellation of this year's World Pork Expo in Iowa.
Hot and cold weather causing concern about your plants? No worries, go tropical.
And speaking of plants, horticulture, the answer in inmate education. Farm Week starts right now. Hello everyone, I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Mike Russell. So glad to have you with us today on Farm Week. Weather leads our program again. Vice President Mike Pence visited Iowa to observe flood damage downstream of the latest spring storms. Disaster aid packages are being put together even as the weather refuses to acknowledge that the seasons have changed. Josh Bittner has the story.
This week, the second bomb cyclone weather system in less than a month prompted blizzard warnings from the Rockies to the Upper Plains, restricting air travel and raising the prospect of renewed flooding in the already drenched Midwest. Heavy snow in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin created life-threatening conditions. While the storm's intensity was forecast to wind down near week's end, authorities say several more inches of snow and relentless winds would be expected across the region.
I was coming south. It's getting pretty bad. Everybody's going 35, 40 mile an hour. If anybody's smart, they won't drive.
Before the weather event hit, an ice jam caused a bridge collapse in Norman County, Minnesota, as the land of 10,000 lakes readied for more flooding. Rising waters also forced several road closures in neighboring North Dakota midweek.
We got a call about a homeowner needing some sandbags. We arrived on scene, assessed their situation, noticed that they could use a couple extra hands, so we volunteered to help them fill in their culvert and get their water situation under control.
As the storm was brewing, two EF1 tornadoes slammed into northeast Alabama, destroying homes and farm buildings. The weather system will leave heavily saturated ground in its wake and is expected to hamper the start of spring planting in some sections of the Corn Belt.
Meanwhile, in Mississippi's South Delta area, farmers and landowners are facing one of the biggest backwater floods since the completion of a levee and drainage project there in the late 70s. Many of them gathered recently to discuss petitioning the government to put in a pump system vetoed by the EPA in 2008. They say that pump system was part of the Yazoo Backwater Project, finished for the most part in 1978, but without a critical pumping plant serving the South Delta region. The landowners say this is the 9th separate flood event since that veto, and that damage over that time has cost more than $400 million. It's estimated that at least 500,000 acres of land in 6 counties are underwater, preventing residents access to their property. Residents say they're angry and are urging Congress and the Corps of Engineers to finish the final piece of the Yazoo project in its entirety. And more flooding still in Mississippi after a storm dumped even more water in the central and northeast part of the state. Tornadoes and heavy winds caused damage in a number of areas, including Hamilton, Mississippi, when an EF2 twister touched down there. Mississippi's Governor Phil Bryant visited Hamilton, declaring a state of emergency. One person, an elderly man, was killed when a tree fell on his home.
U.S. hog farmers have watched as tariffs cut into their top export markets. They would like to sell more product to China, an area hard hit, as we've reported, by African swine fever. Currently, ASF is in 20 provinces there, and the Chinese may have to reduce the size of their herd by an amount equal to the entire U.S. hog market. As producers wait for a trade deal, the disease has caused more international fallout. Here's Peter Tubbs.
Citing an abundance of caution, the National Pork Producers Council this week canceled the 2019 World Pork Expo, which had been scheduled for the Iowa State Fairgrounds in June. The expo attracts 20,000 visitors each year from around the globe, some of whom come from regions with herds infected with African swine fever. African swine fever does not affect humans and requires the destruction of both live hog herds and meat harvested from the infected farm. There is no known treatment for African swine fever. The industry currently lacks a vaccine, but biosecurity measures are holding the disease at bay. China reported the first recent case of ASF in 2018 and has documented over 120 outbreaks of the disease. Officially, over 1 million hogs have been culled, but experts believe that number is propaganda and grossly underestimated. Preventing a jump of the virus across the Pacific is a priority for the U.S. pork industry.
An outbreak of African swine fever in the United States would be devastating to our farmers. They're already facing challenges on the trade front due to trade disputes with Mexico and China, two of our largest export markets. And if we contracted African swine fever here, it would immediately close our export markets.
According to USDA data, China, Mexico, and Japan cut pork imports during the last 10 months of 2018 by over 200 million pounds, a drop of 7% from 2017 sales. Reports are beginning to surface that Chinese consumers are losing confidence in all pork, regardless of where it originates. Even if consumers maintain demand for pork as the local supply declines, tariffs are expected to continue to limit imports from American producers.
As you may have heard, the new Ag Census has been released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's a 5-year survey that looks deep into trends in the ag world, and it's expected to influence policy going forward. The new numbers were actually delayed several weeks thanks to the government shutdown, and much of what's in the census was expected. Fewer farms, older farmers, and a lot of consolidation. But there are interesting shifts. Male producers declined 1.5 points. Female producers increased 27%, and more than half of all farms have at least one woman making decisions. There are more young farmers too, though for the most part, farming wasn't their primary occupation. Finally, the number of dairy farms decreased 17%, but milk production increased by 4% over the last 5 years, indicating just how much consolidation there's been.
If you like the color of tropical plants, but you're just not sure if they'll handle the occasional cold weather we get this time of year, fear not. In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Gary Bachman tells us about tropicals that are perfect for containers outside in the warm weather or inside if it's cold weather. Here's Gary.
Almost every gardener I know loves tropical houseplants, but did you know these plants can make great landscape plants too? Today's Southern Gardening is at Rivers Greenhouse and Garden. So let's take a look at some of these gorgeous plants that are great choices for our summer landscapes and gardens. Pink Bleeding Heart is an easy-to-grow flowering vine from the tropics that offers a steady display of red and pink flowers all summer long when grown in containers. It's a versatile evergreen flowering vine producing panicles composed of 5 to 20 bell-shaped flowers. Growing Pink Bleeding Heart vine in any spot with full morning sun and moist, well-drained soil will keep it happy. Crotons are stunning, and they add an exotic touch to your home and garden. The rainbow-colored foliage of croton plants make them a standout choice for the landscape. The multicolored foliage displays variegated leaves in shades of red, green, yellow, orange, and purple. Cassandra orange marmalade, known botanically as Cassandra infundibuliformis, now say that 5 times, is sometimes called firecracker flower and absolutely thrives in our summer heat and humidity and really brings the color. This easy-to-grow plant is a real attention grabber. The plant produces large clusters of frilly, bright orange flowers that are long-lasting. The foliage is bright green and really glossy. These plants aren't cold hardy for us in Mississippi, but grown in a container, they can be brought inside and enjoyed as pretty houseplants. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman, and I'll see you next time in Southern Gardening.
As long as you're willing to move the containers, you can enjoy those plants, whatever the weather.
Well, Mike, speaking of hot and cold, the hog market is running a little hot here in late April. We'll explain why. Also this weekend, the market's even more U.S. corn may be needed in China despite the hog liquidation there. There's no danger of the U.S. running out of wheat, and there's not much impact on the markets from the supply-demand report. Bloomberg reports hog futures traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange have surged nearly 50% in the past month. The spread of African swine fever is credited with bumping up prices and optimism. Trader Tom Fitzenmeyer, though, is a little worried and skeptical when it comes to the hog market.
We better sell some pork to China because there's a lot of optimism pumped. If that doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened, those things are way overpriced. It looks like to me. I mean, if you're a hog producer and you see those kind of prices, you better get at least a piece of that covered because those are pretty fancy hog prices. We're assuming they lose 1 million hogs, they're going to buy 1 million from us, and everything's going to be peachy for the U.S. pork producer. So they haven't bought anything to speak of yet.
The USDA says China has purchased almost 78,000 tons of U.S. pork during the month of April. Although China's hog herds are apparently being decimated by African swine fever, they haven't cut back on buying U.S. corn. In fact, analyst Sue Martin now expects those corn sales to China to step up even more.
They're liquidating out of their hog herd. I'm hearing up to 40% of their sows gone. But as they're liquidating out of that and the consumers backing away from pork, they're shifting over to other proteins, which means beef, which is maybe the less of all of them. And then it's poultry, which is a big one. And that's a big consumer of corn and soy meal. Then there's also aquaculture. And in aquaculture, it takes wheat for feed along with soybean oil. So I think we're going to see some shifting. So I don't think we're going to see quite the disappointment that we think. And if we're not feeding it there, we're going to be feeding it here because I think we'll expand our poultry industry, and we certainly have a lot of it.
We also have a lot of wheat here in the United States. Even with burgeoning supplies, it has been a bullish market in wheat at times, according to analyst Aaron Newsom. He believes the bullish attitude is basically unfounded because there's no way, in his opinion, wheat prices are going to take off and run.
It's still wheat. There's still too much of it. We've still got an ending stocks to use projected now of up almost 58%. We're not going to run out of wheat. We're not going to tighten the supply and demand situation. As Ted said, we've got another crop coming. Even if it's not looking good coming out of dormancy, who cares? We've got enough wheat on hand right now. It's not going to take off and run. Yes, to Ted's point, it might be the most bullish, but by being the most bullish, it just might mean it's the least bearish at this point. So, yeah, I mean, we're making some sales. We're not going to displace Russia.
Well, let's look at this week's trivia quiz on Farm Week. Before we go any further, we focus on the use of a row crop to make a certain liquor this week. Here's the quiz question. How much corn must bourbon whiskey contain? Is the answer A, 13%, B, 30%, C, 51%, or D, 64%? We'll have that answer coming up for you shortly.
We're going to pause for a short break, but stay with us. Still ahead, a unique program that teaches advanced gardening skills to jail inmates. It's part of a progressive plan to help those inmates find ways to integrate back into society when their time is up. And it's presented by extension specialists and county agents. You'll hear from them and from the inmates too. It's all part of our feature story coming up. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
ATVs are a ton of fun for people of all ages, but these powerful machines can also be a ton of trouble if safety guidelines aren't followed. Never carry more than one person on a single ride or four-wheeler. The four-wheeler can become unstable and very dangerous. ATVs are designed for off-road use only. Never drive one on a highway or any other paved surface. And always ride the right size machine at the right speed. This message brought to you by MSU Extension 4-H.
Before we get back to the market report, let's take a look at the Farm Week calendar. First, on Thursday, April 25th, the 66th Southern Hardwood Forest Research Group annual meeting. It's from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at the CAP Center at the Delta Branch Experiment Station in Stoneville. This year's theme, Threats to the Bottomland Hardwoods Resource. Topics include invasive plant species, chronic wasting disease, and much more. Registration is $25. For information, call Crystal Nelson at 662-336-4800. Next, on Tuesday, April 30th at the Thad Cochran Research Center at MSU in Starkville, an event for ag producers making land use decisions, a program balancing farm success with oil and gas growth. Topics include financial impact, legal obligations, environmental strategies, and more. The seminars are sponsored by the USDA and the Southern Extension Risk Management Education Center. For information, call Rachel Carter at 662-325-3141. Now check out this week's Farmweek Snapshot.
The April supply-demand report from the government was really no big deal for the commodity markets. Extension's Josh Maple says that's because the planning intentions report, released over a week before the supply-demand numbers, stole the show, so to speak. We went over some of the new numbers the other day. Well, ending stocks of U.S. corn are projected to increase. Tell us how much, and is this going to be bearish for the market?
Yeah, so looking at ending stocks being up about 200 million bushels, primarily driven on the use side, not really on the production side, looking at lower use for feed grains, lower use for ethanol, and then also a little bit lower export numbers. So you put all that together and we get a little bit larger ending stocks number. It really didn't have a whole lot of impact on the markets, at least in the few days right after. And that was primarily because we had the acreage report the week before, right. and that report really kind of overshadowed this one.
Now, ending stocks of U.S. soybeans are projected to shrink some. How much there, and what's the outlook for that?
Yeah, so coming down, ending stock soybeans down about 5 million bushels. It's really not a lot considering we went from 900 million down to 895 million. So I call it mostly flat. If you look at what's going on, you're looking at changes in seed use and then also changes in imports. Both of those are pretty small pieces of the overall soybean picture. So not a whole lot of market impact. Again, a lot of what was going on was already priced in ahead of the report.
Now, switching kind of to the global front now, and we talk about this report, some of the corn ending stocks have been raised, the projections as far as South America.
That's right. So looking at Brazil and Argentina specifically, higher production totals in those countries, driven by better yields than expected, and even more acreage than expected in Argentina specifically.
We wrap things up here in the markets with the trivia answer, and here we go. How much corn must bourbon whiskey contain? Well, the answer is C, 51%, according to the Kentucky Distillers Association.
You wouldn't necessarily think of jail or prison inmates as gardeners. After all, as the saying goes, when you do the crime, you've got to do the time. But at one facility, inmates are given a chance to learn something new behind that razor wire, and what they learn may be good not only for them, but for the rest of society as well. Here's Zach Ashmore with the story.
The Chickasaw County Correctional Facility has an interesting way to help its inmates integrate back into society when they leave. The county extension agent, Scott Cagle, has been running a program to teach agricultural skills to inmates willing to learn.
This is our inmate horticulture program. It's 18 hours of training put on by extension specialists and county agents, and it gives the inmates a basic knowledge of horticulture that they can use to obtain employment once they leave the facility. The warden and his wife, both here at the facility, are two of my 4-H shooting sports instructors for the county. And the warden approached me about 4 years ago and asked if there was anything extension could do to provide education to the inmates. And we got our heads together and decided that horticulture would be one of the top classes to offer.
At the beginning of the program, the inmates needed a greenhouse and supplies to grow their crops. The Extension Service provided the materials, and the inmates did the rest. The greenhouse and growing equipment were all constructed on site by the inmates, a testament to their labor, ingenuity, and creativity.
And we were able to provide the materials through a grant that the county had and let them do the labor themselves. But it's a professional greenhouse. It's thermostatically controlled, fans, louvers, lights, grow lights, and it's built extremely well. They gained a lot of knowledge during the construction and during the operation of the greenhouse. And you can see the innovation that the inmates have come up with on their own just to grow things. They say the idle hands are the devil's workshop. Well, these folks can come up with a lot of different ways to take something you and I may consider garbage and turn it into something with a lot of worth.
The inmates themselves have found a lot of worth in a learning opportunity that gives them real-world skills. They also appreciate the chance to have an outlet for their creative needs.
Learn pretty much all the different processes you go through. The soil testing, just getting started basically, up to a small scale, going to a grander scale.
I was a part of the second class, and I had the opportunity, the warden and Mr. Cagle give me this opportunity to take care of this greenhouse, and I really run with it. I guess they give me the opportunity, I seized it, tried to make the best out of it, you know, and with their help, I mean, it's come along real good, I think.
I like the tomatoes we grow, the different kinds of peppers, bell peppers and hot peppers. And then we got a little bit of everything, really.
It's good for the soul, I think, really. It's been a good thing for me. I've done other things, you know, welding, fabricating, and this is just been wonderful for me.
The prison staff has also seen improvement in inmate behavior as a result of this and other programs offered at the correctional facility. John Freeman, the director of programs, says that these activities, including the horticulture program, give inmates a sense of purpose while they serve their time.
All of the inmates that are currently housed at Chickasaw are going to get out. So therefore, the warden on down, we really want to try to provide as much information, provide as many classes as we can for the inmates, because they are going to re-enter society. And the more educational opportunities that we provide for them, the better they will be when they get out, and the better their future will look, and actually the better for the surrounding communities and Mississippi itself. Well, I actually believe that any time that the inmates are engaged in classes, whether it be educational classes, any of our religious classes, anything like that, lowers the incidence of negative behavior that we see out of any inmate. The more active they are, the better they are. And I feel that the more active they are, instead of just laying back there on a rack and waiting for their time to come out, they actually learn new things, learn how to socialize with people, especially when we have people that come in from Mississippi State University Extension Service. I believe if you ask them, they will say that our inmates are better than some of the students that they actually have out in the real world, because these people take the classes because they want to. And that makes a big difference, because they really want to learn something.
The produce grown at the Chickasaw Correctional Facility is donated to charity in Tupelo, Mississippi, to help feed those in need. The administration has continued to encourage positive activities, such as the horticulture program, and many others. According to Administrator Amanda Huffman, this makes it unique among prison facilities in Mississippi.
I think it is, because we offer a lot more programs than anybody in the state, and we reach out to the community and get their input from like Mississippi Extension Service. That is a huge asset to our facility. We offer a lot of hands-on things. We offer a lot of programs that have employable skills instead of just, you know, your basic things like your A&D. You know, everybody has to face those things at some point in time. But to have employable skills taught, that's a huge asset, because they have something that they can take to the world when they leave here. My husband and I, he's the warden at the facility, and we have been 4-H volunteers with the shooting program here in Mississippi for about 5 or 6 years now. And Dr. Scott Cagle is the one that got us started in that. And he saw what we had going here and that we were trying to make a difference in the lives of the offenders here. So he kind of brought up the thing about, you know, hey, what about horticulture? And I love to garden, so that was right up my alley. And so that's how we got started. He got a grant. He's built us a greenhouse, which is fantastic. That allows the inmates to get out there and be hands-on other than just having classroom. So that's the little story. It's, you know, Mississippi State Extension Service has really, really helped our community through many things.
Although there are no studies yet conducted to prove that these programs help the recidivism rate from this particular facility, there is no doubt that giving inmates skills that can be used when they leave is giving them a leg up among others in their position. From Chickasaw County, I'm Zach Ashmore reporting.
Chickasaw County also offers inmates a chance to develop skills in audio and video. In that class, they record the lessons taught by ag specialists and send the curriculum to other prison facilities across the state.
Some real redemptive power there, that's for sure. Well, coming up next week, the end of an era. It is time to say goodbye. After nearly 25 years at Farm Week, my co-anchor Leighton Spann is retiring. He has worn nearly every hat in broadcast journalism, and now as he prepares to ride off into the sunset, we'll sit down together and talk about what he's learned along the way. That's next time on Farm Week. You sure you want to give all this up?
It's time, Mike. Well, remember, if you missed the story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website, and that is farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. We'll see you next week.